Following our parents' burial, my sister flung boxes at my feet. Go find someplace to die, until the lawyer stated. Claire inherits the $4.6 million home. Imagine this. For days after burying your parents, still reeling from grief and using a cane because of an accident that nearly took your life, your own sister looks you dead in the eye, throws moving boxes at your feet, and tells you to find another place to die. My name is Claire Bennett, and I was 36 years old when my sister, Meline, delivered those words without shedding a single tear. It wasn't just the words. It was the ruthlessness, the cold calculation, the sheer audacity of it all. She brought her husband, Evan, and a stack of moving boxes, ready to kick me out of the only home I had left. The flowers on our parents' graves hadn't even begun to wilt. And here she was, my own blood, ejecting me from the very house where I'd spent the last 3 years healing, recuperating and caring for the same parents Meline rarely bothered to see. She assumed I was nothing, that I was useless. She made a grave, grave mistake. To understand why those words cut deeper than any knife, I have to take you back to the day everything changed. 3 years before my parents died, I was living a good life in Hartford. I was a landscape architect running my own small practice, designing beautiful gardens for clients, renovating old homes, even landing a contract with the city's botanical organization. Life felt like it made sense. Then, a drunk driver ran a red light. I don't remember the impact, just waking up in a hospital bed with metal rods in my spine and doctors telling me I might never walk again. The surgery was 13 hours long. The recovery? Years. My apartment had stairs I couldn't navigate. My work involved tasks I couldn't do. And my savings? They simply couldn't keep up with the endless medical bills. So when my parents offered me their first-floor guest room, I accepted. I moved back into my childhood home, into the same bedroom where my high school track trophies still sat on the shelf. For 21 long months, I was in a wheelchair. I learned to navigate doorways, bathroom tiles, and the crushing humiliation of needing help with things I'd done on my own since childhood. My mother would read to me on bad days, her voice a balm. My father built a ramp on the back porch, so I could still sit in the garden we loved. Meline, on the other hand, called once a month, sometimes less. She never asked about my physical therapy. She never asked how I was doing. When I answered the phone, her reaction was always the same, a dismissive, "Oh, you're still there. Put Mom on." Like I was some stubborn stain that wouldn't go away. What Meline never bothered to ask, and therefore never knew, was that I had started walking again 5 months before our parents died. First with a walker, then a cane. I was healing. I was getting stronger. But to her, I was always just the worthless one. The Christmas before my parents passed, Meline arrived home with her picture-perfect family. Evan, her husband, sported a cashmere coat that probably cost more than my monthly medical payments. Their 2 kids, Lily and Noah, tore through the house as if they already owned it. Meline, ever the stage manager, directed everyone, rearranged furniture, scrutinized my mother's table settings, and reminded us all of proper procedures. I spent 3 days making her kids' favorite meals, homemade mac and cheese for Noah, chocolate chip pancakes for Lily. I did it standing at the counter, my cane propped against the stove, my back screaming after 20 minutes, because I wanted to help. I wanted to be useful. On Christmas morning, everyone gathered in the living room for the traditional family portrait. My father set up the tripod. My mother adjusted the tree decorations. The kids squabbled about who would stand where. Meline looked at me and smiled, but it wasn't warm. "Claire, maybe you should sit this one out," she said. "We're looking for a good shot for our Christmas card." The room went silent. My mother's lips parted, then closed. My father just stared at the camera, pretending not to hear. Meline shrugged. "The wheelchair doesn't really suit the look, you know." I wasn't even in my wheelchair. I was standing with a cane, but I didn't protest. I'd learned that arguing with Meline just gave her more ammunition. So I just smiled, nodded, and went into the kitchen. Through the glass, I watched my family pose without me. I heard the shutter click. 1, 2, then 3 times. I had no idea my father had seen the entire thing, or what he did the very next morning. My parents died on a Thursday in March. They were flying to California for an old college friend's wedding. A private charter, 7 guests, clear skies. The plane crashed somewhere over Nevada. They said it was a mechanical failure. They said it happened quickly. When the call came, I was in the garden, trimming the roses my mother had planted 17 years before. The phone rang, and 45 seconds later, my entire life fell apart again. Melline flew in for the funeral and took charge of everything. The arrangements, the flowers, the guest list. I was too numb to fight her. I sat in the first pew, looking at all these people, realizing I didn't know half of them. Melline's friends, her contacts, people who had never even met my parents, but wanted to pay their respects. For days after we buried them, Melline cornered me. She found me in the living room, surrounded by condolence cards I couldn't bear to open. She didn't sit down. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, with Evan lurking behind her like a shadow. "I've spoken with the lawyer," she announced. "Everything goes to me. The house, the accounts, everything." I just stared at the ceiling. "What lawyer?" I asked. "The lawyer," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "Mom and Dad's estate lawyer. He confirmed it." "Did he give you any documents?" "A copy of the will." Melline's eye twitched. "I don't need to show you anything. You have 17 days to find another place to live." Something cold settled in my gut. Melline had said the lawyer. No name, no firm. My parents had used Samuel Prescott for over 20 years. If she'd actually spoken to him, she would have dropped his name. She was lying. That night, I sat alone in my parents' study, reflecting on my life. No job. I'd liquidated my company 20 months ago because medical expenses made it impossible to keep the lights on. No savings. What little I had went to copays, specialists, and the never-ending list of medications, keeping my spine from stiffening up. No income, disability benefits, barely covered the essentials. And now it seemed no home. I looked around the room. My father's desk, worn smooth after 42 years of use. My mother's reading chair, the cloth faded where she always rested her head. The window looking out onto the garden we'd created together. She planted, I designed. We dreamt of what it could become. This house was more than just 4 walls and a roof. It was where I took my first steps. I learned to ride my bike in that driveway. My mother taught me to cook. My father taught me to debate. Every room held a memory. Every corner held a piece of my parents. If I walked away now, I wouldn't just lose my house. I'd lose them all. Over again. Worse, I'd be proving Melline right. I'd be accepting that I was useless, that I didn't deserve to be here, that I was worthless. I couldn't accept that. I wouldn't. I started opening drawers, searching for something. A hint that Melline was wrong. In the bottom drawer of my father's desk behind old tax records and faded pictures, I found a business card. Samuel Prescott, estate attorney. I turned it over. There were 6 words on the back, written carefully by my father. Call him. He knows everything. My father never made notes. Never. So why this one? 5 days later, Melline came back. I was in the living room, practicing walking without my cane. My physical therapist said I was ready to try. I wanted to prove to myself that I could do anything on my own. The front door burst open. Melline strode in, carrying cardboard boxes, with Evan following behind, loaded with more. She dumped them at my feet, the hollow thud echoing through the room. "Pack your things," she commanded. "You have till Monday." "Melline, I need more time." "I'm still what? Still claiming to be sick?" "I was in a car accident. You know this." 3 years ago, she snapped, kicking one of the boxes at me. "You've milked it long enough." Evan shuffled uneasily. "Honey, maybe we should stay out of this." "Evan, behind me!" I heard Helen Brooks, the nurse who'd cared for my parents in their final months, step in from the kitchen. She paused at the doorway, eyes wide. Ruth Callahan, our 70-year-old neighbor, was right beside her, casserole in hand. They both heard what happened next. Melline walked closer, close enough for me to smell her expensive, biting perfume. She looked at me the way you look at garbage that needs to be taken out. She said, "Find another place to die. You are now useless." The words hung in the air. Helen made a small gasp. Ruth's hand went to her chest. Melline didn't even look at them. She saw them as invisible, inconsequential. But I noticed Helen doing something unusual. She pulled a small notepad from her pocket and jotted something down. Quick, unobtrusive, like she was taking vital signs from a patient. At the time, I had no idea why. Later, I would. Ruth was the first to move. She stepped forward. Her 70-year-old frame stiffened with the kind of rage only decades of friendship can ignite. She had known my mother since before I was born. She'd held me as a baby. She'd watched both Bennett daughters grow up, and she had definitely taken a side. Melline Grace Bennett. Ruth's voice could have sliced through glass. If your mother could hear you right now, she'd roll in her grave. Melline turned slowly, her face set in polite bewilderment. "I'm sorry. Who invited you into this conversation?" "I have known this family for 42 years, which is longer than you've been alive, young lady. This is a family matter. I was part of your family before you could walk." Ruth walked to stand by me, her hand resting on my arm. Margaret adored both her children, but she wasn't blind, Melline. Neither were any of us. Something flared on Melline's face. Uncertainty, perhaps, or just irritation at being confronted. Evan moved forward, grasping for his wife's elbow. "Melline, come on. We can discuss this later." "Don't touch me." She pulled back, her voice rising. "My mother left me in charge. Not her. Not a neighbor who thinks she has the right to. Your mother did not leave you in charge of anything." Ruth's words were hushed. Final. "Not yet." The room became utterly still. Melline's jaw tightened. She looked at me, then Ruth, and finally at Helen, who was still standing in the kitchen doorway with her notepad. "Fine." Melline grabbed Evan's arm and dragged him toward the door. "Monday, Claire. I need you out by Monday." The door banged behind them. Ruth gripped my arm. "Don't you worry, honey. This is not over." I wanted to believe her. The next morning, Evan returned alone. I found him standing on the porch, hands in his pockets, looking like he'd lost an argument with himself. He practically trembled when I opened the door. "Melline has no idea I'm here," he said hastily. "Can we talk?" I let him inside. We sat in the living room, him on the edge of my mother's chair, me on the couch, my cane propped against the armrest. He refused to meet my gaze. "Look," he began, "about yesterday. Melline's under a lot of stress. Pressured to kick her handicapped sister out of her deceased parents' home?" He grimaced. "It's not personal, Claire. We really need the money." I went very still. "Need the money? The home itself is worth." He paused, caught himself. "I mean, the estate needs to be settled quickly for everyone's sake." "Evan." I leaned forward. "What's happening?" He was silent for a long time. Then, in a voice just above a whisper, "We're in trouble. My investments last year didn't pan out. We owe a lot more than we can pay." "How much?" He glanced up, then down, anywhere but at me. $420,000, give or take. The number hung between us like smoke. "The bank is threatening to take our house," he said. "The kids' school has asked about next semester's tuition. Melline tries to keep things together, but Evan!" Melline's voice, sharp as a dagger, echoed from the doorway. We both leaped. I hadn't heard her car pull up. "What are you doing here?" She gripped his arm, her knuckles white. "Let's go now." As she hauled him outside, Evan whispered something to me. It might have been sorry. It might have been help. And I understand what some of you might be thinking right now. Why didn't Claire fight back? Why didn't you say anything? I asked myself the same question. But here's what I've learned. Sometimes the wisest reaction is to not react at all. If you've ever been underestimated, let me know in the comments. And if you want to know what happened in the lawyer's office 5 days later, trust me, you're not going to want to miss it. Now back to the story. That evening, I found the business card again. Samuel Prescott, estate attorney. The calligraphy on the back seemed to glow under the desk lamp. Call him. He knows everything. I dialed the number before I could talk myself out of it. The phone rang twice, followed by a deep, measured voice. Prescott Law Offices. Mr. Prescott, this is Claire Bennett. Jonathan and Margaret's daughter. A pause, then a warmth entered his tone. Miss Bennett, I have been waiting for your call. Something in his voice made me grip the phone tighter. Have you? My father said you'd call me. In fact, he was pretty confident. Papers rustled in the background. I believe your sister has been making claims over the estate. She claims everything belongs to her. She claims you confirmed it. A dry chuckle. I have not spoken with Meline since your parents' anniversary party 4 years ago. She has certainly not called my office. The relief that washed over me was nearly overwhelming. So, she's lying. I would not presume to characterize your sister's statements. What I can tell you is that your parents had very precise wishes. He paused. Very specific, Miss Bennett. What does that mean? It means I'd prefer you to visit my office before the formal reading. Certain portions of the will require context. Another pause, this time longer. Nobody, not even your sister, is aware of these details. I scribbled down the appointment time with trembling hands. Miss Bennett. His voice softened. Your father amended his will 7 months ago, shortly after Christmas. He told me he could finally see things clearly. He had been watching the Christmas photo, even though I wasn't in it. Helen Brooks arrived the day before the official will reading, to say her final goodbyes. She stood on the doorstep, a cardigan wrapped tightly around her shoulders, looking smaller than I remembered. For 10 weeks, she had been a fixture in our house, taking my parents' vital signs, administering their medications, sitting with my mother through the long nights when the pain kept her awake. Her job was done, and she was moving on to the next family, the next patient, the next ending. I wanted to give you something, she said. She reached into her bag and pulled out a leather-bound notepad with worn edges. I recognized it instantly. My mother's handwriting filled every page. Her looping cursive, the way she always pressed too hard with her pen. Your mother asked me to keep this safe. Helen pushed the notepad into my hand. She said you would need it eventually. She said you would know when. I traced my mother's initials on the cover. What's inside it? Her thoughts, her days, her observations. Helen paused. The last few pages mention you and your sister. I didn't read them. It wasn't my place. But I think she wanted you to understand something. What do you understand? Helen looked down the street as if to make sure we were alone. Mr. Prescott has something else. Your mother made a video message a few months ago. She met my gaze. She was very specific about when it should be played. My throat clenched. Helen, why are you telling me this? She reached out to squeeze my hand. Claire, your mother knew. She knew what Meline would do. So she prepared. Helen took a step back towards her car. Your parents loved you both, but they were not blind. The journal felt heavy in my hands, almost like a promise or a warning. Meline planned the memorial reception the way she planned everything else. Expensively and without consulting anyone. The restaurant was Italian, high-end, complete with linen napkins and servers who introduced themselves by name. She'd rented out the private dining room, arranged the caterers, and sent invitations on cream-colored cardstock with my parents' names embossed in gold. She hadn't asked me about the food. She hadn't asked me about the guest list. She hadn't asked me anything at all. I arrived late. My cab had gotten stuck in traffic, and walking from the parking lot with my cane took longer than I expected. When I entered the private room, Meline was already standing at the head of the long table, glass of wine in hand, delivering a speech. 45 people sat before her, cousins and uncles I barely remembered, acquaintances of my parents whose names I'd forgotten, Evan's business associates, Meline's book club, a sea of faces, some grieving, others just observing. They toiled their entire lives for this family, Meline was saying, her voice adopting the same tone she used when she wanted people to adore her. And I swear to uphold that legacy. I will protect this house, this community, everything they built. She spoke of this family as a claim, like a title of ownership. I stood at the doorway, but no one in the room recognized me. Mom and Dad would be so proud of what we've accomplished. Meline concluded, the Bennett name will live on. I'll make sure of that. I gripped my cane until my knuckles turned white. She hadn't mentioned me once. Not once. It was as if I had already been erased from the family she was so eager to protect. Then, someone in the crowd saw me standing there. A murmur rippled through the room. Heads turned. Meline's sentence stuttered briefly before she recovered with a practiced smile. Claire, you made it. The way she phrased it, as if my presence was a small surprise or an afterthought, made my skin crawl. I walked towards an empty seat in the back, my cane tapping against the smooth floor in the sudden quiet. Meline! Aunt Helen, my father's older sister, spoke from the middle of the table. What about Claire? Where will she live now? The question hung in the air. 45 sets of eyes shifted between us. Meline's grin didn't waver. Claire has her own plans. She's going through a transition. Transitioning to where? Helen pressed. Meline shrugged softly. Wherever she can manage. She's always been resourceful. Several people chuckled. Small, nervous chuckles, the kind people give when they don't know what else to do. But they laughed. I stood there with my cane, feeling the weight of each glance. Some looked at me with sympathy, others with judgment. Most simply turned away, uncomfortable, ready to return to their drinks and polite conversation. Meline passed me on her way to greet someone at another table. As she did, she leaned in close. I told you to stay home, she muttered. You're embarrassing yourself. I didn't reply. I remembered what Samuel Prescott had said when I went to his office that morning. Allow her to talk. The more she talks now, the greater the silence afterward. So I took my seat. I folded my hands in my lap and waited. Meline had no idea what was coming. Ruth arrived 20 minutes later, dressed in black and with an unsettling expression. She scanned the room until she found me, alone at my corner table, pushing food around my plate, but not eating. Then her eyes locked onto Meline, who was holding court near the bar, giggling at something Evan said. Ruth's jaw stiffened. She walked straight up to me. Is it true, she asked, sitting down. What Helen just told me. Did Meline really say you were transitioning? I nodded. Ruth got back up. Before I could stop her, she raised her voice, loud enough to drown out every other conversation in the room. Margaret and Jonathan would be mortified if they saw this. The room went silent. Meline turned. Her wine glass stopped halfway to her lips. Excuse me. Meline's voice was icy. You heard me. Ruth didn't flinch. She pointed at me. This girl took care of your parents every single day while you were too busy to visit. She bathed them. She fed them. She held your mother's hand when she was scared. Ruth's voice cracked, but she continued. What have you done, Meline? Send flowers. Someone gasped. Evan moved closer, reaching for Meline's arm, but she shrugged him off. You have no right. I have every right. Margaret and I were best friends for 42 years. Ruth walked to stand by me, placing her hand on my shoulder. And I know what kind of daughter you've been. The hush was total. Somebody coughed. A fork clinked against a plate. Meline's face had gone from crimson to white. For the first time, I saw a crack in her composure. Something uncertain. Ruth bent down and whispered in my ear. I spoke with Samuel this morning. He told me what's coming. Just wait, honey. Just wait. 5 days later, I walked into Samuel Prescott's office on the 14th floor of the Hartford Financial Building. The receptionist led me to a conference room at the end of the hall. Dark wood and leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The kind of room where big things happen. Meline was already there. She sat at the head of the table as if she owned it, her Hermes bag perfectly placed, her posture impeccable. Evan sat beside her, swiping through his phone with the feverish desperation of a man who desperately wished to be anywhere else. I took my seat across from them, my cane resting against the chair. Meline didn't glance at me. Samuel Prescott entered, carrying a leather briefcase, a court reporter following him. He seemed older than I remembered, silver-haired and dignified, with the serenity that comes from decades of delivering life-changing news to people unprepared to hear it. Thank you all for coming, he said, taking his seat. Before we begin the formal reading, I need to clarify a few things. He opened a manila folder and looked at Meline. Mrs. Collins, have you ever seen your parents' complete will, which they filed with my office? Meline straightened. I have seen the will. Yes, it was on my mother's nightstand. The paper on the nightstand. Samuel nodded slowly. Could you describe it? 4 pages. Standard legal language. Everything was left to me as the eldest daughter. Samuel removed his spectacles and began to wipe them clean with a cloth. The motion was leisurely, almost dramatic. Mrs. Collins, he asked gently, have you ever seen the complete will, or merely the summary your mother kept as a reference copy? Meline's hand clenched around her purse. For the first time, her smile faltered. What exactly are you talking about? A summary? That was the will. Meline's voice had a sharper edge now. Samuel unzipped his briefcase and pulled out a thick document encased in blue legal covering. He placed it on the table between us. This is your parents' final will and testament. 36 pages. Executed 7 months ago at our office. Witnessed by 3 of my associates. Notarized and filed in probate court. Meline leaned forward. That is impossible. I saw the will. It was dated 5 years ago. What you saw, Mrs. Collins, Samuel said, was a rough draft. Your parents kept it on their nightstand as a reference, but they changed their estate plan dramatically before they died. Samuel tapped the document. Here is the legal version. Only one version matters. Evan's phone clattered onto the table. He didn't pick it up. This is fraudulent. Meline stood, her chair scraping across the hardwood. You're assisting her in fraud. She probably fabricated it. Mrs. Collins. Samuel's voice didn't raise, but instead hardened. I've been your family's attorney for 25 years. I wrote your parents' first will when you were 16 years old. I don't commit fraud, and I don't appreciate the insinuation. Meline opened her mouth, then closed it. Her hands shook. Sit down, Samuel urged. It was not a request. She sat. I watched my sister's expression shift from amazement to fury to terror. When she finally looked at me, there was something different in her gaze, something that resembled panic. They wouldn't do this, she muttered. They wouldn't. Samuel began turning pages. Perhaps we should let your parents speak for themselves. The room felt smaller. The air felt thinner. And I knew everything was about to change. Samuel read carefully and methodically, emphasizing every word. We leave our investment portfolio of approximately $15.5 million to our daughter, Meline Grace Bennett Collins, which will be held in a managed trust. Meline made a sound like she'd been punched. A trust? Evan leaned forward. What do you mean, a trust? We need the money right now. Samuel continued as if Evan hadn't spoken. The document includes a letter from your parents outlining their rationale. Shall I read it? Yes, I said before Meline could object. Samuel adjusted his spectacles. We love Meline, but we have seen her struggle with financial decisions her entire adult life. We have seen money vanish into projects that never materialized. We do not want our life's work to be lost within a year of our death. A trust is not a punishment. It is protection. Meline's face had gone from white to gray. Evan stared at the table as if he wished it would swallow him whole. Samuel now flipped several pages. On the family home and adjacent property, which is valued at approximately $4.6 million. I stopped breathing. Our daughter, Claire and Bennett, will inherit our home. Claire has been our comfort and friend during our declining years, subject to the stipulation that it not be sold for 12 years. She has nurtured our garden, held our hands, and brought us peace. She owns the house. She has earned it. My vision blurred. Meline was speaking up somewhere far away, complaining or demanding, but I couldn't hear her. All I could hear were my parents' voices coming from beyond the grave. There is one more thing, Samuel said. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a USB stick. Your parents created a video message to be shown at this reading. They were very insistent about it. Meline's head jerked up. What video? I had no idea about any video. That was the objective, Mrs. Collins. Samuel connected the stick to a laptop, and my mother's face appeared on the wall-mounted screen. She was seated in our living room, in her favorite chair by the window. My father stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder. They both looked tired. They both looked determined. Girls, my mother began. If you're watching this, it means we're gone, and it means things have unfolded the way we feared they might. Then my father spoke. Meline, you are our firstborn. We've loved you from the moment you arrived. But love does not mean blindness. We've seen how you treat your sister. We've seen how you dismiss, demean, and push her away. My mother's eyes glistened. Claire, you're not worthless. You never were. You are our quiet strength. You stayed while Meline chased things that glittered. You cared. You showed up. We revised our will after Christmas, my father began. After we saw Meline omit you from the family portrait. After we heard her tell your mother that you were pulling us down. His voice trembled. We were not going to let our death be another way for you to be forgotten. My mother reached for the camera. We hope you can reconcile. We truly do. But if you can't, and Meline continues on her path, Claire will never be evicted from her home. The screen went dark. I could barely see through my tears, but I heard Meline's chair scrape back as she stood and walked out without saying a word. If you've ever had someone in your family suddenly see your worth, even if it was too late, you'll understand how I felt in that moment. Let me know in the comments if this situation resonated with you. And for anyone wondering what Meline did next, believe me, the story isn't finished. The actual conflict was about to begin. But first, do you believe Meline deserved what she received, or was it overly harsh? Leave a comment below. Now back to the tale. Meline didn't get far. I found her in the hallway outside the conference room, leaning against the wall, her arms wrapped around herself. Evan stood a few steps away, phone glued to his ear, speaking urgently to someone. A bank, maybe. A creditor. People circling their lives like sharks. When Meline saw me, something shattered. This isn't fair. Her voice was raw. You don't understand. I have a family to support. I have responsibilities. You told your sister to. Find another place to die. She flinched. I didn't mean, yes you did. I held my voice steady. You meant every word. You've meant every word for years. You don't understand what it's like. She was weeping now, mascara streaming down her cheeks. Evan's investments failed. We owe $420,000. The bank is going to seize our house. My children are going to lose their home. And you. She pointed a shaky finger at me. You don't have anyone. You don't have children. You don't need the money. I let her words hang in the air between us. You're right, I responded softly. I don't have children. I don't have a husband. I don't possess any of the characteristics you believe make a person desirable. I moved a step closer, but I also didn't spend years mistreating my own sister. I didn't stand in our parents' house 4 days after their funeral and tell you to go somewhere else to die. Meline's shoulders trembled. For a brief moment, she reminded me of the lost and scared little girl from my childhood. But then I remembered how she had made me feel useless over the years. And I remembered that kindness has its limits. I could have destroyed her in that moment. I could have recounted every cruel remark, every dismissive gesture, every time she made me feel like I didn't deserve to exist. I could have told her precisely how I felt about her perfect life, her perfect image, her perfect lies. But that's not who I am. That's not who my parents raised me to be. So I leaned on my cane and spoke gently. You told me to find another place to die. I found somewhere. I paused. It's called home. Meline's breath caught. I'm not going to gloat, Meline. That's not who I am. But I am going to draw a line. I met her gaze. You will never speak to me that way again. Ever. Not in private, not in public, not in front of your children. I'm done being your punching bag. She stared at me as if she was seeing me for the very first time. I have a proposal, I said. The trust pays you $55,000 every year. That's not insignificant, but I understand it won't solve your immediate problems. I took a breath. I'm willing to lend you the money you need to pay off the bank. No interest, reasonable terms. Enough to save your home and keep your children in school. Meline's lips opened, then closed. But there's one condition. I held out my hand. You apologize publicly, at a family meal, in front of everyone who attended the memorial reception. You tell them what you said to me and admit you were wrong. The hallway was silent. Evan had ended his phone call. He stared at me as if I had a second head. Meline wiped her tears. And if I don't? You'll have to figure it out yourself. It's your choice. Meline didn't respond. She looked at Evan, who was staring at the floor. Then she regained her composure, picked up her purse, and walked to the elevator. Evan followed without looking back. The doors closed behind them, leaving me alone in the corridor. Samuel Prescott joined me a moment later, placing a kind hand on my elbow. Miss Bennett, we still have papers to finalize. I nodded and followed him back into the conference room. The court reporter had left. The video was dark, just Samuel and me, with the weight of all that had transpired. He slid papers across the table. Deeds, account transfers, signature forms. I signed where he directed, my fingers trembling slightly. Your parents were proud of you, Samuel added as I signed the final page. They told me that many times, your mother especially. He took off his spectacles and rubbed his eyes. She said you were the only thing that made those last few months bearable. I was speechless. She also said something else. Samuel removed a sealed packet from his briefcase. She asked that I give you this after the reading. A letter specifically for you. I took the envelope. My mother's handwriting on the front. For Claire. When you're ready. One more thing. Samuel stood and shook my hand. Your father asked me to tell you that he changed his will 3 days after Christmas. Samuel's voice caught. He said that he had finally figured out which daughter regarded them as individuals and which regarded them as bank accounts. I left that office with the deed to my childhood home, $15.5 million in a trust with my name on it, and a letter from my mother clutched to my chest. It didn't feel like triumph. It felt like grief. 6 weeks later, I moved into my parents' bedroom. It was strange at first, to sleep where they had slept, to wake up to the same vista of the garden my mother had seen every morning for the past 30 years. But it also felt natural, as if they had saved a spot for me. I continued physical therapy twice a week. Most days, I didn't need the cane anymore. I was walking on my own, cooking my own meals, and imagining what the future might hold. The neighborhood had shifted in subtle ways. People who had come to the memorial reception, who had chuckled when Meline called me resourceful, now crossed the street when they saw me. Word had spread about the will reading, the video, Meline's words, and her loss. They felt embarrassed. Good. Meline and Evan sold their home in Greenwich for $685,000. After paying off their debts, they barely had enough to cover the security deposit on a 2-bedroom apartment in a town 40 minutes away. Evan was fired from his job after his bad investments came to light. Something about undisclosed losses and disgruntled clients. He was now working for a regional bank, earning a fraction of his old salary. Their children had switched from private to public school. Meline claimed it was because the public school offered a stronger arts program. Nobody believed her. She called me once, for weeks after the reading. "Is your offer still on the table?" Her voice sounded flat and weary. "Yes. I'm not ready to apologize yet." I was silent for a moment. "I'm not ready to write a check." The call went dead, but she'd called. That was something. It wasn't forgiveness, but it might have been the beginning of accountability. 10 weeks after the reading, I finally read my mother's diary. I had been carrying it with me since Helen Brooks gave it to me, keeping it on my nightstand, sometimes clutching it as I slept. But I had been unable to read it. The prospect of hearing my mother's voice again, even through her handwriting, was like opening a wound that I wasn't sure I could close. But that night, sitting in her garden under the stars, I was ready. At first, the entries were mundane. Grocery lists, doctor's appointments, weather observations, which plants were blooming. My mother was always a practical woman, even in her private thoughts. Then I reached the final 10 pages, the ones about Meline. I love my eldest daughter, but I worry about her. She chases approval, success, and the appearance of perfection, none of which she can ever truly grasp. I hope she finds peace someday. I hope she understands that what she has is enough. Then, about me. Claire has no idea how much she saved us after the accident when she moved home. I thought I was taking care of her, but she was taking care of us. She saved us from loneliness just by being here, making breakfast, reading to me, sitting with Jonathan in the garden. The final entry was made 4 weeks before the accident. Claire is my mirror. Patient, quiet, strong in ways no one sees until it's too late. I should have told her more often. I should have shouted the words aloud instead of writing them down. "Claire, you must know this. You were never useless. You were everything." I closed the diary and looked up at the sky. The tears flowed, but they were different this time. They weren't filled with pain. They were releasing it. 8 months after my parents died, I started working part-time, initially for a landscape design firm in Hartford. Small projects, nothing too demanding, but it felt amazing to use my skills again, to watch something beautiful emerge from nothing. My first significant undertaking was the garden behind my parents' home. My mother had planted roses, hydrangeas, and a small vegetable patch that had grown wild in the months since she'd been able to tend it. I renovated the entire space, keeping her flowers, adding new paths, building a small bench where I could sit and reflect. It was the first thing I'd created since my injury. It wouldn't win any awards, but it was mine. It was home. Meline wrote a letter 5 months after the will reading. No phone call, no visit. A letter. "I've been thinking about what you and I said and everything else. I'm not ready to apologize in front of everyone. I'm not sure if I'll ever be ready. But I want you to know that I'm trying to understand why I became this person. And I'm sorry, even if I can't say it aloud yet. I'm sorry." I reread the letter 3 times. Then I put it in my desk drawer, among our mother's journal and our father's business card. It wasn't the apology I had asked for. It wasn't public. It wasn't accountability. But it was something. We weren't close after that. We probably wouldn't be. But we could be in the same room and not pretend the other didn't exist. We could exchange birthday cards. We might, possibly, build something new. My name is Claire Bennett. I was told that I was useless. I was told to find another place to die. Instead, I found a home.